What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to the AEW Worlds End 2024 Pay-Per-Viewpoint post-show podcast coming to you from smark.com and the Smack Talk podcast. I am Tony Mango, joined as always by Callum Wiggins, who is muted, I think. Still muted, I think. Yep, still can't hear Callum. He's talking. You can see him talking, but we can't hear him yet. Something's going on there. Everything was perfectly fine a second ago. It all went sideways. I don't know what is happening with our live feed. That's indicative of the microphone problem at the end of World's End, I guess. Let's give this another shot and see. Let's see if we got it. Are we back up, Callum? Nope. There we go.
There was some issue with my Skype thing. It's like I was clicking the microphone to like turn it on and off, and it was just like wasn't changing at all. And then I just went onto the audio settings, and then it said, "Oh yeah, you're muted." So now it's working. So it should be fine from here on out.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. I am going to set us a goal if we get 5 super chats in the next 15 minutes. Bonus episode in January. I would say normally bonus episode this month, but it is the 28th, so I don't think we're getting a chance to do that. But let's see. There you go. The goal is up now. I see we have Ashton in the chat. What's going on, Ashton? Good to see you here. And of course, anybody else funneling in, if you are on the live side of it, then take advantage of the super chats and the live chat that we have going on here. Also, if you are listening after the fact, you can just leave a comment below on YouTube. If you are listening elsewhere, of course, chat it up on any different platform that we have there. We've got the usual Facebook and Twitter things, the page on smark.com. We've got the Discord server that's always up there and an open invite for anybody who wants to join any of those. Keep in mind as well, all this marketplace stuff, if you are on the super chats side of things, that's great. It's also a nice way to help keep the lights on. Same thing with the thanks button. Same thing with the join button. If you click on that, you got access to the same stuff as the Patreon. You got the Darkcast tier, the Pick Your Poison tier, all that good stuff there. Even $1 a month is greatly appreciated, and $5 and up gives you the early access content too for anything we do in advance and kind of schedule later on. Redbubble and TeePublic is where you can get your merchandise, and we'll come back to some of that stuff a little bit later on, but let's start getting into the pay-per-view. That's the whole point that we're here for. Now, I will say that I missed a portion of this pay-per-view. I had a prior engagement that kept me for the first hour, essentially. Well, from, I guess, the first hour of like 6:30 to 7:45 or so. I actually missed a little bit of the first match on the main card too, so I didn't get a chance to see anything from the pre-show from that 6:30 to 8 o'clock onward. I know the results. I read what happened. I saw some little clips online, but I didn't actually actively watch it. So as far as like if anybody's listening to this for just like pure results, Toni Storm defeated Leila Gray, Jeff Jarrett beat QT Marshall, and there was an 8-man tag. Action Andretti, Leo Rush, and the Murder Machines, I think it's what they're calling themselves, Brian Cage and Lance Archer. They beat the Outrunners and Top Flight. And the only other things that I had read was Jeff Jarrett is going to have some kind of a career announcement on Fight for the Fallen, right? Or is it... Wait, was that Collision? No, it's Fight for the Fallen. Collision is the Deonna Purrazzo and Toni Storm for the first time kind of thing, since they are going in that gimmick. Did you watch the pre-show and check any of this stuff out?
Yeah, I watched the pre-show. The match themselves, Toni Storm and Leila Gray was like a totally serviceable match. Nothing special, but Leila looks good. I think that she's been improving. Toni was still doing the Toni stuff, like the whole rookie thing, the crowd chanting, she's a rookie. That's while the match was taking place. So and Toni won, as you'd expect. So as I say, that's just pretty bog standard, fine opener. Jeff Jarrett and QT Marshall was what you'd expect again, really, from it as well, which was just two guys that do a very old school approach to things, taking very few bumps, but just playing into the crowd. I mean, they spent the first 3 minutes of the match was basically just QT interrupting Jeff Jarrett doing the strut. And then he does the strut, and then he gets a big pop for it, of heat for a little while. Jeff Jarrett makes a comeback. Jay Lethal takes out Aaron Solo to even the odds, and and Jeff Jarrett wins. Yeah, and then he does his announcement later on in the buy-in to 0 Hour to say that he's going to make an announcement about his future on Dynamite. So yeah,
do you have any indication of what you think that might be?
The way that the rest of his crew reacted when he said that thing makes it seem like they think that he's going to announce his retirement. So I think they're leaning so heavily into that it probably isn't that.
He's going to come out with a pink or a salmon jacket and just kind of be like, I still got a lot left in the tank.
but yeah, I don't know necessarily. It might be a case that he's going to do like a year-long countdown until then, but like Danielson and Sting have done in the past, that wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, and the 8-man tag was pretty fun. I don't think it was anything particularly special. It was just a means for Russian Action Andrade to get another victory. The Murder Machines basically destroyed the babyface team pretty much on their own, but then Leo Rush and Action Andrade got in at the end to steal the victory, get the pin on one of the members of Top Flight, and then Private Party came out and danced a little bit, and then stood up with the titles. So they tried to really push the fact these 4 teams, they're all like lining up for a shot at Private Party, when it actually feels like this tag team seems a bit dead. So yeah, that didn't inspire a lot of confidence, but I like the new Action Andrade and Leo Rush team. I think that they have like an actual bit of swagger and intensity about them, and then I think that there's a very good chance the Murder Machines will be the next tag champions anyway.
So then on the rest of the pre-show stuff, as far as I'm aware, like nothing else had happened. The
only other thing that I saw was that Daniel Garcia was challenged by Mark Briscoe in a segment for the TNT Championships. That's going to happen. I can't remember if that's on Dynamite or Collision, but it's happening this week. So.
Oh, I completely didn't see that on the rundowns I had read. So Briscoe challenging specifically for the title, or is it like?
Well, they were on the same segment. They were in a segment together, like with the panel, and they were just talking before. I think just after the Jeff Jarrett and QT Marshall things, they were just invited on probably to talk a bit about the Continental Classic, because obviously they both competed in it. And Briscoe brought up the fact that he beat Daniel Garcia in the Continental Classic match, and so they're going to have the match for the TNT. They're going to have a match for the TNT title this week.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's what you use. Like I say, that's what New Japan used the G1 for. It's not just to obviously crown the winner and the who would typically be fighting in the Wrestle Kingdom main event. It's to also set up other feuds by having other champions getting beaten in it.
Yeah.
So
it's an easy way of doing it, because it's basically doing an eliminator match without doing an eliminator match separately. And, when that all balances out, Mark Briscoe can win the title. He doesn't have to. And they can kind of just move on from that point too, and just be like, all right, well, still buds, and, and shake hands and all. Thank you to Ashton for the super chat. It's not showing up on the goal as being one. I think I set the goal to the $5 thing, but I'm gonna it doesn't matter. I'll count it. That's one of the 5 that right there. So thank you for that. He just says, good to see you again, Callum. Thanks for Smark on Moment, guys. Well, thank you for joining, Callum. Callum. John, thank you for joining, Ashton. Thank you for your support and everything. Mm-hmm. And so I missed that, and by the time I was able to get home and get my stuff all fired up, the match had already started of the first match of the card, Will Ospreay against Kyle Fletcher in the semifinals for the Continental Classic. And at the time that I clicked on it, he being Ospreay, was already bleeding, and I missed whatever the move was that happened to do that. Was it like a specific move, or was it just something where he, started?
It was Kyle Fletcher. It was Kyle Fletcher lawn darting him into the barricade.
Oh, okay, and he just caught himself on thing, or do you think?
Well, I assume he bladed.
Okay,
that was the move that's
they blamed it on
the bleeding. Yeah, and he he was gushing. I think he caught. I think he might have caught an artery or something. Like it felt very akin to, not as bad as the Guerrero JBL one from years and years back, but more closer to that than what we saw from Adam Cole later in the night.
Yeah, I mean, they were like pretending that they were going to stop the match, and it worked really well for the mood of the situation, because by the time I was able to start watching it and all that, I was like, all right, I'm already sucked in. You already have me as far as like, is Fletcher just going to win this by referee stoppage, or is it going to be Ospreay fights back and all? And I was assuming naturally that Ospreay was going to fight back and win, because we did all these predictions and stuff, and from what I was able to see, it seemed like it was a pretty damn good match.
Yeah, I thought it was another just outstanding encounter between these two. They really leaned into the fact that Fletcher had beaten him previously at Full Gear, and Fletcher was in control for the vast majority of this match. Obviously, having Ospreay bleeding a gusher early on and throughout the entirety of the match pretty much helped lean into that thing. But Ospreay showed a lot of fire, a lot of heart. They were doing like back and forth chops. Ospreay was bleeding, but like their chests were completely beat red and purple in places with how hard they were hitting each other. It looked like Fletcher would have the victory because he hit the brain buster, the running kicks to the back of the head in the corner, like the Yakuza kicks, the hit the last ride bomb at one point, just like hitting all his big moves, but didn't end up going for the top rope brain buster that beat Ospreay last time. Instead, he went he ended up even hitting like a hidden blade at one point, but he goes for another running kick. Ospreay's able to get out of the way of it and wins with a Styles Clash, which was interesting. As I say, it's always good to see some wrestlers quote unquote secondary moves getting victories, because it makes it feel more unpredictable when they hit that move in a later match and you feel like, oh, this could actually be a finish now. And yeah, so I think that was an interesting way. It kind of came out of nowhere. It's like Fletcher was in complete control, and then Ospreay just hit that out of desperation, was able to get the 3 count out of it, which is, I think, the way they need to keep presenting this, in the way that if you are going to lead into a third and final match between them at Grand Slam Australia, that Fletcher is kind of the dominant force out of the two of them, and Ospreay's only got victory over him through well, I'd say it was still a clean victory, but it was it's a
lucky move.
He was on the back foot, and he just pulled a rabbit out of the hat right at the very end to just beat Fletcher. But Fletcher pretty much owned Ospreay for the majority of the match. So yeah, I think it's set up for a good finale between those two in the next couple of months.
This is one of those rare instances where, normally, especially when it comes to WWE, I would be like, okay, if you've done the match before, we've done it again, we need to see the rematch have some sort of stipulation, and it needs to have last man standing thing or a cage match or whatever it might be. This is one of those ones where I'm like, this doesn't need it. You don't have to go with a hardcore style anything. You don't have to put them in a 2 out of 3 falls thing. Just do the rubber match and have them do exactly what they've been doing, and everybody's going to be like, yeah, hell yeah, it works.
Yeah, I completely agree that it doesn't necessarily need a stipulation. I wouldn't be against them adding one, but I think that it almost kind of elevated it because of the Continental Classic stipulations. The fact that Don Callis wasn't there, he couldn't get involved at all. Not that he got hugely involved in the match at Full Gear, but meant that his presence was completely out of it. I think they should. I think they could pretty much run it back, do the same, and just say, okay, we're 1-on-1, we hate each other, we need to settle this once and for all, and that can just be a big match that you promote at Grand Slam without having to have any sort of championship involved. But there is still windows of opportunity for that, because of course with Daniel Garcia being challenged by Mark Briscoe, Carl Fletcher also beat Daniel Garcia in the Continental Classic, so he could be lining up a TNT title shot in the meantime as well. So there are different avenues they can take for all this stuff. But yeah, I think it's pretty much certainty that we'll get this rematch, this rubber match at the next pay-per-view.
Yeah, I mean, they could technically do it on, Dynamite on January blah blah or something like that, but what's the point if you've got the pay-per-view coming up? You got plenty of other matches you could do instead.
Yeah, the only thing I'd believe them to do that would be if they want to, because I think that if you do Ospreay and Fletcher for the rubber match, then Ospreay is going to win. So the only reason I think they might do it before that is that if they want to have Fletcher have a match where Fletcher wins.
Yeah.
So that's it. But that's it. But I think they'll go with the bigger match because it'll help draw the crowd, because Ospreay's also had a lot of experience in Australia as well, so he'll be able to help draw a crowd there as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got the Aussie Open, United Kingdom kind of thing, and United Empire. I mean, United Kingdom, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Undisputed Kingdom, you throw that in there too. I don't know why not.
No, we don't need to throw that into anywhere, as we'll talk about in a little while.
So the second semifinals match was Kazuchika Okada against Ricochet. As expected, Okada beats Ricochet, and then afterward, it's where Strickland comes out to make fun of the fact that Ricochet had been talking about how he was going to beat Okada, win the whole tournament, do that whole thing. Swerve's like, well, you got to the point that I was in, and he leaned into the whole toilet paper angle. So that's going to start the new year with a clean slate, and threw that in there like the typical like streamers that you would see. So they passed a bunch of toilet paper out to the crowd. Prince Nana got that all set up and all, and I think it's kind of interesting that we're already sort of moving past the Hurt Syndicate Swerve kind of thing, unless they end up having Ricochet join the Hurt Syndicate. But even then, they didn't seem all that interested in him, so they'd have to kind of backtrack that and kind of go loop around. But Ricochet with this heel turn is going to be the thing that saves him, or it'll be the thing that just proves that there's no means of saving that. So I am down to see where they go from here going forward, and the match itself was good, and it's kind of how I expected it to go.
Yeah, I thought this was a very good match. Obviously, it wasn't at the same level as the match prior to it, but I don't think it needed to be. I think it still showcased that this heel turn for Ricochet is working really well. I think that it's the whole toilet paper thing has just been like a really good blessing in disguise for them, because you do it organically at the Hammerstein Ballroom, where ECW were famous for and Ring of Honor were famous for throwing streamers around, and people were doing that instead. So they've leaned onto that. Almost certainly, the one that was thrown at Ricochet towards the end of the show was a plant. I mean, it may not have been. It would have been fun if it was organic, but I imagine it was a plant just to set the tone. But I think that the match itself was good. Okada hits the Rainmaker, gets the victory. Not many like super standout spots that like stick out to me from this one in particular, but I know that it was good. It was a good watch. And then Strickland coming out and like having the crowd throw all the toilet paper onto Ricochet was a nice visual as well. Ricochet just standing there and taking it, like just visibly frustrated. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where the feud goes. Obviously, there's still Strickland has unfinished business with the Hurt Syndicate, and Ricochet's been talking with the Hurt Syndicate. So presumably, this is a natural bridge between Ricochet joining the Hurt Syndicate and becoming one of their featured players alongside Bobby Lashley. So yeah, I think this really works, and it's good to keep Ricochet's momentum going with a bone of pairing him up for a upcoming feud with one of their top stars. So yeah, I can't really complain too much about this segment at all. There was nothing wrong with it, really. It's a good stepping stone for what early 2025 will look like for Ricochet.
And we know that they're going to end up having good chemistry together, so the match is going to that's going to deliver.
Mm-hmm. I know that Ricochet is going to be in like Japan as well, upcoming soon with the Wrestle Dynasty match against Zack Sabre Jr. So maybe there'll be something leaning into that as well. I mean, who knows? By the time that Ricochet is coming in to have his matches with Strickland, he could be IWGP World Champion.
I don't think so, but
I think that's unlikely. But he would have at least had a match for the IWGP World Championship.
I mean,
so they might be able to lean into that as well. With Swerve just keeping leaning into the fact like you just can't cut it, and just keep goading Ricochet to the point that we get a new kind of even more aggressive side out of him.
Keeps making fun of Trevor. And the Tijuana Street Fight was next for the AEW World Women's Championship, and for the most part, I enjoyed this match too. I mean, when you get Thunder Rosa and whoever her opponent is, and you just have them beat the crap out of each other, and they have the tack spot and all that stuff, it's a lot easier for me to digest than when they start doing, so-and-so has a regular match and their chemistry is off or something. I wasn't super duper invested into it, I have to say that, but at the same time, the match itself delivered fine for me for something that I wasn't really interested in heading into it. And Mariah retains as expected. So now we move on. I don't know how soon they'll do the next phase of the Toni Storm thing. We're kind of assuming that it's probably going to take place at Grand Slam, but maybe they pull the trigger a little bit sooner. I don't know. Maybe they give Mariah something else in the meantime. But I'm at least pleasantly surprised with how this match went down.
Yeah, again, there's few things that are more kind of reliable in AEW than a women's plunder match being good. Essentially, it's the bread and butter for their division, is that you put people into this kind of match and they'll almost always deliver, and this one was no exception. Don't get me wrong, there was a much better women's match later on in the show, which we'll talk about, but I think that they still held their own, bringing the thumbtacks in. Thunder Rosa taking a big bump into them from the Mayday, having thumbtacks all the way up her back and shoulders, and even a few that were in the back of her head. So
yeah,
looked a bit rough as well. Hopefully they were just in her hair rather than actually going through into her skull, but you never know. But yeah, and they incorporated Thunder Rosa's father at ringside, and Mariah just taking his cane and mocking him with it. I thought she was going to use it to beat up Thunder, but they decided to stay away from that point. Thunder doing her most recent cool spot, which is the running up the table to hit the missile drop kick, which I think always looks good, and then throws the dirt into the maze from the graveyards of Tijuana, and just and then uses that to then hit a pile driver off the apron through a table, which looks fairly gnarly because she went really quickly from the pile driver. It wasn't like she held the pile driver position for a while. It's immediately pile driver, this next second later she's through the table. So yeah, and gets the pin off of that. So a good title defense for Mariah. Hopefully there is some more things coming between now and Grand Slam, because I'd rather we didn't just sit around on our hands for the next 2 months just waiting for that inevitability to happen. So just have Mariah do something else. It doesn't need to be anything super spectacular, but she should still be having more matches and at least one more feud in between now and Toni Storm getting her match. So, but yeah, this was a thumbs up segment as well.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that more than I did the next match.
Well, yeah.
Adam Cole against MJF for the Dynamite Diamond Ring.
What a surprise. This sucked.
I couldn't get into it, really. This was one of those matches that I realized that I was I'm kind of actively not paying attention to this, and I'm busy doing something I didn't need to do right then, and I was just I think I'm going to call up customer service and talk to somebody about, for anybody that's curious, potentially moldy cheesecake. But and I was just I'm more interested in taking care of that than watching this match, and the fun elements of it to me were really just the couple of times that MJF was saying things the crowd was chanting for him, and he was if I needed your help, I'd tell you to, so shut the fuck up or something. And it played out as just I don't want to say a full dud, but realistically, what could have happened here that could have been interesting? Well, Adam Cole could have won the ring, and it would have been oh, okay, well, somebody's finally beaten him for the ring. Or Taven and Bennett could have turned, and it would have at least been all right, well, you set it up that way, and you did the Undisputed Kingdom on the outside specifically for that reason. Instead, it ended up just being they get sent to the back because the referee thinks that they had gotten involved. And MJF wins the match. Afterward, he's about to attack Cole, and Roderick Strong comes out, makes the save. Kyle O'Reilly comes out, does the same. And then those three and Taven and Bennett just have a big group hug and they leave. And this is the lamest way for this big story to have possibly ended. But at this point, we don't need anything more. What would be the purpose of another match?
Well, it's not over until MJF says it's over, and or anybody else says it's over. Yeah, I mean this whole match and segment was as like confusing and fucked up as this entire feud has been since World's End last year. And then they come into this one, and the match itself is a match. It's fine. There's
not the worst thing ever.
Yeah, exactly. These two know how to work. They can have a good match. But the problem is the dynamic's completely off because the crowd is cheering for MJF and they're booing Adam Cole, which is not the way that they've built up this, well, at least this portion of the story. But the crowd decided, as is their right to do so, that, we can do whatever the fuck we want. We can just cheer for whoever we want to. And we decided we're going to cheer for, the guy that's on his own against the guy that's coming to this with his two guys, like, defending the ring that doesn't belong to him at this point. And, and MJF uses that to, like, distract the referee by saying that they had sent him into the steel steps. He tries to use the ring. Adam Cole gets away with it. He's going to go to use the ring, gets low blowed, gets hit with the heat seeker, and like MJF wins. But then Roderick Strong comes out, chasing him away, and then it's Kyle O'Reilly sends him back into the ring, and they do like a 3-on-1 beatdown of MJF using like the ring, and the crowd like boo. Well, first of all, they don't react, and then they boo as soon as the Undisputed Era kind of reunite, and then they have David a bit. So there's basically those five against MJF on his own at this point, and the crowd naturally goes, well, yeah, I'm going to cheer for the one guy that's like fighting against all these odds on his own.
The guy that was definitively the babyface during the whole big, 3/4 of this feud,
and who won the match, and he's now being beaten up by 3 sore losers.
Yeah,
and it's he cheated to win, but that's like, they don't really mind that so much in the same way that's like, it's the he's our scumbag thing. That was the whole point, is that MJF didn't take he took shortcuts or he took opportunities. But yeah, as like this whole thing is just completely screwed up because the crowd is now, or this crowd was very anti Adam Cole and anti the whole Undisputed Era reunion. So now they're probably, well, if this is any indication of what it's going to be like moving forward, because the whole match, the only time the crowd was invested or excited was when MJF was doing something. Like anything that Adam Cole did got zero reaction, or either got zero reaction or a slightly negative reaction. And then at the end, it was just like, the crowd just didn't want to see, I don't know if they didn't want to see the reunion or they just thought that it was unfair the way that it was handled. But I think that it might need to necessitate, if this trend continues, it might have to necessitate another pivot where MJF has to turn babyface again and Cole and the group have to turn heel. So it's totally confusing. If it was up to me at this point, I would just examine the situation, just go, right, we just need to cut our losses here. Just have Adam Cole reunite with just Carl and Roddy, leave Taven and Bennett behind. They can go, if Ring of Honor is starting up a show soon, they can just go on Ring of Honor and just be part of that instead, or just be a tag team on the lower end of the roster and be separate from everything else. And they can be a trio, and they can do, and the Undisputed Era guys could be a trio and do whatever, and MJF could take a month off and come back and start doing some other things instead, and just draw a line under it and say, okay, it's a new year, it's 2025, let's do something fresh, do something different with these guys, because they're all talented guys that could do different things with other people on the roster, and maybe it'll work better. But they're just going to go back to it. They're going to probably have a match at Grand Slam with MJF, and whether it is Taven and Bennett that will end up turning, or it's just two other guys, those guys against
We're going to get the blood and guts match. It's going to be wasted on this feud, right?
Well, I mean, at this point, you can't put it past them that this doesn't go all the way to World's End 2025. Because it's they just won't end it until they feel like it's been satisfying enough, or that they've come to a conclusion that feels good for them. And this doesn't feel like a good conclusion, but it feels like, please just end it. It's beyond the point of redemption at this point. it's changed so much, and it's had so many like
false starts and
false starts and potholes along the journey that you sometimes just have to chalk things up to a loss and just say we can't like salvage this anymore. Just draw a line under it. It was bad. Let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes a bunch of people that are talented just don't seem to have great chemistry together, where the feud is just, the term that's been used a lot is snake bit. Like, this has not been a good feud since the start. It hasn't been that it's like a hiccup here and there. Like, it's consistently been a struggle. And it'd be one thing if like the promos were really good or the matches were really good despite the promos or whatever, but like really nothing's been good about it. So this is a weird kind of dumb way to end it, but at this point it's like, well, I don't want to see them continue it either, because I don't think that they're going to like reach the status where it's going to make the whole thing worthwhile. I don't think they've got that at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, so as I draw a line under it and move on, but they won't. So.
Yeah, they probably won't. And I was like starting to get checked out at that point, and I was like, we reached the part where it's going to be. I haven't been watching the first hour and a half of it, so like I thought I would have a little bit more stamina, and I'm like, oh, this MJF and Adam Cole thing is starting to like, we're hitting that rock, not hitting the rock, hitting the wall. Thankfully, though, right after that was Konosuke Takeshita against Powerhouse Hobbs, and that was a much better match. So I ended up actually really enjoying that a lot. And Takeshita retains, but it has to go through, quite a bit of a fight to do it. Hobbs looks like he was really working his way through his injury and everything, so they both look strong at the end, despite how Takeshita looks a little bit stronger since he actually did get the win. But this was pretty much like as good as I would hope that it would have been, and, rock solid performance from both the guys.
Yeah, this was a very solid meat guy match, where essentially there's two big guys just beating the shit out of each other for the majority of the bout. They played into the Hobbs leg injury, so playing into that, like Hobbs at one point, right towards the end, having to almost take his knee braces off to relieve some of the pressure because he was putting so much weight onto it, both from the attacks that Takeshita was doing on him, but also just doing his own moves like spine busters and a big power slam off the top ropes. Like, eventually it was just all coming down to the fact that he just couldn't put a lot of weight on his leg, and Takeshita was able to take advantage of that to help get the victory. I think Don Callis played a good role in this, in the fact that he was on commentary and he just looked absolutely terrified about what Hobbs was doing. I mean, when Hobbs kicked out of the Blue Thunder Bomb at 1, then it's just like Cass just getting up off his feet. It's like, oh shit, this is going to go badly. But Takeshita was able to survive it, as you would expect. But yeah, as I say, I think it was just a really good Hoss fight. And yeah, as I say, Takeshita wins, and so he gets the more momentum going forward. But Hobbs didn't look bad in defeat. And I'm sure, hopefully this is a good start for him to have a pretty successful 2025 in whatever form that takes. I think that there's a good chance that he might form at least in the interim, a tag team with Mark Davis for a little while, just to carry things over. Because even though it would be good to see Hobbs win championships in 2025, it's even with the amount of championships that AEW has, it feels like there's a lot of pathways, or there's a lot of people that are already in contention for that, or you'd expect to be in contention for that. But it at least sets him up well. He had a really good match here, so he should hopefully be having a lot of good matches in moving forward. But again, it's one of those situations where it's difficult to not have a good match with Takeshita. So
Hobbs is the type of guy that I could see, if they wanted to, depending on what they plan on doing with ROH and all that, Hobbs, I could see them giving him a prominent title in ROH and being let's see what you can really do with the TV title or something. And
he'd be world champion in Ring of Honor.
Probably would, yeah.
I think as I say, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he wins a TNT championship or the international championship sometime later this year. But yeah, I think this year needs to be a bit more of we'll kind of hopefully given the opportunity and given chances to flourish on the main roster, or to be part of the just the overall cycle of things, that this could maybe set the groundwork to say, like, okay, is this guy a potential like main event star AEW in 2026?
Yeah.
Like, this has to lay the groundwork for it. But and of course, like, a big part of that is that can he stay healthy for all of 2025?
True.
So, but hopefully he does, because as I say, this was another good start. He doesn't seem to have lost any sort of step so far with the recent injuries that he's had, so that's good to see. And yeah, as like, this was definitely a nice come up from the disappointment of the previous segment.
So we got Frankie in the chat. Hey guys, wasn't able to watch the pay-per-view, sadly. Internet was trash. Saw the results though, and some clips. Mercedes versus Kris and Okada versus Ospreay seemed great, so we'll check those out. Especially for anybody who doesn't know, Frankie does collision coverage on Smark at the moment. Always thankful for that. Yeah, so that was the next match, was the Mercedes Moné against Kris Statlander match for the AEW TBS Championship, and they had another good match between them. They basically did what we had said before about the idea of, I guess they just wanted to run it back, and we have no title change in anything, but no appearance from Camille, no like furthering any kind of story or anything. They did the match again, and Statlander came up short, but she put up a good fight. Crowd was super into it. They thought for a couple moments here and there that the belt was going to change hands, and that's really all you can ask for in like the bubble within a match itself. Is you want to reach a point where both people can potentially win, and Statlander gets a good reception after the match too from the crowd. That's just kind of like, well, you gave it a good shot. So overall, I mean, for somebody who made Mercedes Moné what my pick for like the worst in a lot of categories of our end of the year awards, I thought that this was a good match.
Yeah, I thought this was, again, just another excellent match between these two that have phenomenal chemistry with each other. I think that like there's multiple spots of like Kris just lifting Mercedes and carrying her back into the ring. There was a lot of apron spots in this match.
A lot of pile drivers on this pay-per-view too. In general, it's like
package
trying to drive home the idea that Cody Rhodes wouldn't be able to hang it on this.
Yeah,
but they did a lot of like count out stuff in this match too.
Oh yeah, that was a fantastic spot near the end where Mercedes hits the tombstone pile driver on the apron, and like because it's a perfect camera, perfect production work here, where it's just like it's pretty much at an 8 or 9 count, and the camera just pans to Mercedes like lifting her arms up as they think she's won, and then just Kris just appears from nowhere, just sliding back into the ring, and that was awesomely well put together. And then you go into the finish sequence where it looks like both sides coming close to victory, and it's similar to how it worked out in the previous one, where like Mercedes just snuck a victory. In this one, she snuck a victory again, but through a kind of I would say convoluted, but a more like lucha style pin predicament where she just managed almost like a seatbelt type pin that like Willie uses to get the victory. So again, she just sneaks it, but does it in a way that's fair and clean. So she didn't have to cheat to win. And yeah, they showed Kris getting that kind of ovation at the end of it. But I think that the chemistry that these two have shown has made me waver a little bit in whether I think, because I'm still pretty confident that the goal is Willow at some point, and Willow will be the one that beats Mercedes for the title, and then that frees up Mercedes to go after the World Championship at some point. But I think that they could really just do the third match here, because I think the crowd is super into Kris still, and they've seen these two matches. This was the first AEW women's match to go over 20 minutes.
First? Like, ever?
First ever. Yeah.
Really?
First on pay-per-view, I believe. I think maybe you had like the Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker. Some of their matches went over it, but I think the first on pay-per-view that's gone over 20 minutes.
Huh.
And funnily enough, it's still not the longest match that Mercedes has had this month. So, because the match she had against Hazuki in the New Japan show went about 2 or 3 minutes longer than this one. So, I think Mercedes has, I don't want to say like she's taken that criticism to heart, and don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of fair criticism that's from her past year's performances. But I think like she's finished the year super strong in ring, Whereas like you've had the 2 matches with Kris Statlander, that match against Suzuki, which I thought was great as well. Like, and so she's stepping up at this point, and she's showing that, okay, maybe some of my like promo segments and that kind of stuff is still definitely needs some work, but I'm not going to get beaten in ring right now. And she's proving to be like, this is now
the Sasha Banks of old that was like doing the Bianca Belair match and the Bayley match, and
this is kind of like best in the world Mercedes coming out, which is good to see. And obviously, a big part of that is the fact that Kris Statlander is also one of the best in the world right now, and she's had fantastic matches all year. So it takes 2 to tango in these things. And I think this is definitely high in the contention. I think it's better. I would say that this match was at least on par. I'd argue that it was probably slightly better than their match previously. And so that puts it in contention as one of, if not the best women's match of the year for AEW. I still kind of prefer the Kris Statlander Willow Nightingale one, because it was just, the plunder aspect of it helped for that side of it. But I think that, we're on a good footing when it comes to the TBS Championship moving forward, I believe, at least for the time being. And then she's going to have that match at Dynasty with Mina Shirakawa, so hopefully that's good as well. If she continues this kind of vein of form, then we could be looking into, okay, 2024 was kind of a soft launch for Mercedes, and 2025 is when we're going to get, the real Mercedes, hopefully.
The rocky road of 2024 that she's had, it kind of balanced out a little bit. Hopefully the promos go along with it too, because man, that was not a good 2024.
Because she's never been good at that. So I don't. So I wouldn't hold your breath in that regards for that to change. But hopefully at least the matches make up for the fact that she will probably never be a good promo.
The penultimate match for this show was the final for the Continental Classic, and Kazuchika Okada beats Will Ospreay clean. As we had talked before, the idea of the interference was, of course, null and void because it's Continental Classic, so those rules are always in play. And Ospreay has a solid fight, despite the fact that he comes up short, but he comes into it a bloody mess. He leaves bleeding. They shake hands afterward, and Okada then gets interrupted by Christopher Daniels, who comes out and says normally he would be coming out and he'd be presenting the championship to Okada because he retains his title, obviously. But he's no longer an interim EVP because this guy is back, and this guy is Kenny Omega, who is in his suit, comes out, presents the title to Okada, gives him, a little applause, has a little stare down moment. They made it a point on the commentary to say that he's not cleared to compete yet, and that they don't know when he's going to be cleared to compete, but obviously they're hinting at the idea that this match is going to be happening sooner rather than later, or at least somewhere down the line. And the match itself, very good match, but not at all surprising to hear that based off of the people involved. And I will admit, despite this being like, oh, it's good that like the match was really good, and it was good that like it's good to see Omega back and all that, I still kind of felt like at this point I was like, all right, well then not much is happening on this pay-per-view, and I kind of wanted something to change that, and we're going to come back to that. But it did start to feel a little bit much like, we didn't get any title changes at all. I wasn't expecting that to be the case for this, but the Omega surprise wasn't really too much of a surprise either. We had talked about that at the time too, so that fell a little bit flat for me, I have to admit.
Well, I mean, I hope for Omega's sake that he's cleared by January the 5th, because he's wrestling on January the 5th against Gabe Kidd at Wrestle Dynasty. Mm-hmm. So I presume he'll be cleared by that point. But as I thought this match was phenomenal. Like, again, high up there in terms of match of the year candidates, if we were still doing that stuff. But that's essentially Will Ospreay on pay-per-view is going to have one of the match of the year, and against Okada, a guy that he's wrestled so many times before, and he's going to bring out the best of Okada, and that's exactly what we got. Had so many great sequences towards the end, as is always the case with like Okada match. It's like it's a build up beforehand. Like he takes a bit of time to ease himself into the match and just build up to the crescendo at the end, where they were just going into like flying all over the place with missing the Rainmaker attempts, flying in with like flying hidden blades and like drop kicks from out of nowhere and all of that stuff. So it was a really like well built story going into it, and then like it's capping off with like the incredible sequences that I'm so used to with Okada, or at least I have been used to Okada when New Japan haven't been so used to it in AEW because he just hasn't hit the same heights. But this was definitely his best match since coming into AEW, and hopefully again is a good sign moving forward, because if the match that does happen with Kenny Omega, it was very evident by the production and camera positioning when Kenny Omega was in that the sign behind it was the all in Texas. So that's very much on the nose that okay, that's where this match is going to take place. And I saw someone put it on Twitter, and I think that like it would be the right course. I'd essentially just announce that match after Dynasty and just make that the first official match of
try to boost some ticket sales and get that going.
Just have because that's what's June, July, that kind of time, isn't it?
It is. I believe it's early June, or it might actually even be May. I know it's earlier than it normally would be.
Yeah, because they've switched over.
It's July 12th.
Yeah. Okay, so July 12th, yeah. So that's still a distance away. There's still probably other things they could do in the meantime, but they were pretty much on the nose of putting that on there. So yeah, I think Omega will still do things in between because he's having a match with Go Kid. He'll have other matches in between. There'll be other stuff going on, but I think he very much should do Okada versus. Very much here. There's going to be Okada versus Omega there probably for the Continental Championship, because I imagine Okada won't drop it between now and then. So, but yeah, I'd say I'm obviously super excited for that match to happen because of how good these guys have been in the past. And yeah, I thought this was a very, very good end to what has been a solid Continental Classic, which has advanced some things. So, as I say, I don't really mind if pay-per-views don't necessarily like have a lot of things that change or do anything. I just want the show and matches itself to be good, and this was if the show had ended after this match, then I would have said, oh, this is outside the MJF and Cole thing. It'd be like, oh, this is a great show. But then the main event happened, so.
Well, the main event was a four-way for the AEW World Championship. It was Jon Moxley defending the title.
I counted at least 8 or 9 people in this match.
Well, you had Orange Cassidy, Adam Page, and Jay White as the challengers, and then you had Wheeler Yuta, Claudio Castagnoli, Marina Shafir ringside.
And Christian Cage and his crew hanging out in the rafters, and then Hook on the other side of things. And then there was 3 guys that came out at the end as well. It's like...
Yeah, a lot of shenanigans. Not one person that I would have thought would have popped up here, which would have been Darby Allin. So he just didn't end up doing anything on that front. But like, I don't know. I couldn't super get into this match either. And it ends with White taking the pin. I had tossed out that idea that I thought that was going to happen through something with Hangman Page, which didn't quite happen exactly the way that I was expecting it to be, but White takes the pin, and most of the heat ended up being on Yuta for breaking up a pinfall right before that. So then it just sort of ends with like a whimper, and then FTR comes out with Adam Copeland, and they take the fight to them, and Copeland's like, we're going to take it all from you. You guys are mine. Your ass is grass, or whatever the hell he had said. And I just was like, okay, let's get the Moxley and Copeland match. Either we do that over the course of this next month and they move on to something else for Grand Slam. Maybe that's the plan for Grand Slam. Maybe they get the trios match and like win those trios titles or something along the lines, in the next month or so. But I wasn't super into it, and it felt like it kind of reiterated what I had felt before about the whole like this Omega return wasn't doing too much for me, and nothing happened to like change anything on the pay-per-view. Nothing like pushed a whole lot going forward, and for the big finale to be just it's Edge and FTR and they're gonna do that, I was like, all right, well, That's not special. Not to say that they're not special. That, you know, great talents, all the things along that line. But like, all right, we knew that FTR was going to have some kind of a match, and we knew that he was going to be returning, and we knew that he was most likely returning in that scenario. So the big like, oh my god, that's did you see that coming? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I it's quite like unfortunate to see how stale the world title scene has become in AEW in particular. Just how this whole Death Riders thing just isn't working. As the same way the Elite thing didn't work. It's just because at the end of the day, it's just Moxley's just a heel champion that has cronies that do all the work for him. That's essentially what the storyline has devolved into. I know that just he'll keep cutting good promos and try and get people invested into the whole idea of like we're taking back the soul of AEW or whatever the phrase, however he wants to kind of frame it. It's just like that people want to be world champion, but they can't be the world champion the same way I am. But essentially, it just all boils down to he's holding the title hostage and he has people interfere, and he would have lost the title probably 2 or 3 times this match if it wasn't for Claudio Marina or Wheeler getting involved, or the fact that just the other guys were just infighting with each other at different points in it. The biggest pop in the entire match was Marina getting hit with the Blade Runner, which is again is the classic things of pro wrestling, which is there's nothing more reliable in terms of getting a pop. There's 2 things that are most reliable things of getting a pop, which is putting someone through a table and hitting a woman. That's kind of the 2. That's the 2 things that will guarantee a pop in pro wrestling. I
specifically had a conversation with somebody earlier today, the prior engagement thing I was talking about, where among other things that were discussed, the specific phrase was said of where she's like, now, forgive me for being judgmental, but I believe wrestling has a very rednecky element to it, right? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, that at least is what it used to be back when my brothers and I used to watch it, back when it was the WWF. Is it still like that now? And I was like, yeah. I mean, it's like,
it's most like, yes, it's most fundamental crap, but at least they've done the thing of like they've had Marina like beat up guys and stuff like that, so it's cool. Like, at least she's getting some of her medicine back for that. And
Jay White's not like, you know, a squeaky clean type of character anyway. It'd be a different story if this was like Orange Cassidy punching her or
yeah, exactly. But yeah, they've but yeah, as I say, the match itself was just kind of, you know, it was okay, but it wasn't anything particularly special. I wouldn't have thought it would be out of place as the main event of like a Collision rather than the event of a pay-per-view. I just think with all the interference involved, it was just like so messy compared to a lot of the other matches where like most of the other matches is like clean finishes, good matches, just solid work between everyone involved. And it was kind of just this and the, like, it was these, you know what the biggest issue is? And I'm just going to say it, AEW tells too many stories. And that is it. Because the whole show was really... The matches that were great were the ones that had pretty either minimal story or like minimal interference. It was just 2 guys or 2 girls going out there, just, you know, having a match for a championship or for Pride or for the Continental Classic or whatever. And just, you know, having a match and trying to beat the other person. And then them ends up winning... like not even like in most cases through any kind of like really nefarious means. And it's the 2 and then it's the 2 kind of, you know, story matches. It's the 2 ones where there's like an angle involved that absolutely sucked the whole life out of this pay-per-view. And that's, as I know, it's like that's an issue with the actual storytelling. I'm not saying don't do stories and just have matches every single, but it does shine a light on what the issue with AEW is, which is that when they are trying to tell stories, they're not good at the moment.
Yeah, if you're going to go for storytelling, you go more for WWE. That's their bread and butter more. And then if they're going to try to do the half-assed kind of version of the WWE thing, it exposes them as being not WWE. And then it means the people that are trying to watch AEW because they don't want to watch WWE are the ones that are going, well, that's not what I want, and it's not even a good version of what I don't want. And then people like me that are more into the story is like, it's a struggle to watch the story play out. And
well, in what has been like a difficult creative year for AEW in terms of just like putting stuff out and just sticking to stories or stories working on landing with the audience, but the biggest issue has been like in that whole rigmarole, the thing that has remained like consistently strong is their pay-per-views, because essentially it's just, for the most part, they're just going to have really good matches on the pay-per-views. It's almost like people need to, like AEW needs to kind of step back and look at it and say, like, what is it about the pay-per-views which people just universally like love and praise and kind of for the most part really enjoy, whereas our TV is getting consistently more like negative reviews? What's the issue? And the issue is that, on a pay-per-view, you just kind of let the wrestlers do what they do and you get out their way. Whereas what they're doing on TV is like, we have writers now. We have writers and we have people behind the scenes, and as I say, we need to justify them being there, so we need to give them something to do, so they have to come up with things in between. Whereas everything that's kind of been good about AEW this year in terms of just their televised product, which has been primarily the pay-per-views, because I don't think they've had, let's say, there's a few pay-per-views that have been a bit like mid, but for the most part, all of their pay-per-views are usually good to great. And that's because, they just let the best wrestlers in the world, or some of the best wrestlers in the world, wrestle each other and have great matches. And that's for the most part what I want as an AEW fan. Whereas this thing with Death Riders, which again, it started off interesting with like a very violent start of it, but it's just devolved into heel champion with cronies that uses cronies to fight his battles for him. And it's just, it's not interesting. It's very, very one note and boring. And you've seen it played out a million times before with other people. And it doesn't help with the fact that like the challenges they've assigned to it don't feel particularly strong. Like, how good that like guys like Jay White and Cassidy and Adam Page are in the ring, but in terms of actual characters, you didn't believe for a second that any one of them was going to win this match.
Not at all.
So, and now you've got FTR, which is like a super stale act at this point. Like they are just, doing the same thing, and they've been doing the same thing pretty much on repeat for 2 years, which is, fine when you're still having great matches, but they haven't really been firing on all cylinders for the past year or so. They've kind of just been in the background. And Adam Copeland, which is, an Adam Copeland John Moxley match in 2025. It's like, I say, I'm a big fan of what Copeland did in his style of AEW. It blew all my expectations out of the water in terms of how good he was, how motivated he looked, the feud that he had with Christian Cage, and like his run with the TNT Championship. All that is really good because that is just, a veteran guy who's going to be mixing up with like some of the younger guys in the business, having some good matches with them, sharing some of his experience, and then dropping the title to what should have been like dropping the title to some young guy, whether that was Jack Perry or whoever, and then moving on to something else, maybe, as I say, Trios Championship with FTR, reuniting with Christian Cage, going for the tag titles, doing some other fun stuff like that. Now he's going for the World Championship, which is just like that's the thing that I was immediately terrified of when Adam Copeland came in, is that he would just be going straight for the World Championship at some point. And it's just like, we've got other guys. We have guys in this promotion that should be being built up and developed. Maybe they are doing it, and this is just a stopgap for it, but it doesn't fill me with a lot of inspiration about the early side of things for the World Championship. There's a lot of stuff that I've seen from AEW in the last couple of months that does fill me with a lot of positivity. Like Mercedes is cooking now, and she's having great matches, and Okada's now had like the best match that he had this year, and like he's starting to feel a bit better, and we got Omega coming back, and so that will fuel that side of things. And Ospreay's always going to be great, and I like the stuff they're doing with Ricochet and him being part of the Hurt Syndicate, which has been a great act. So there's a lot of positivity, but the world title scene is just a big issue right now. So
it'd be nice to see them just not bother doing any kind of like I mean, you look at like the list of the people that have been champion. Jericho starts it off, and it's the typical Jericho thing. He drops it to, what was it, Kenny? Or no?
No, Moxley.
Yeah.
First reign, yeah.
Moxley has had multiple different title reigns, so he's done some different things with them. And, you know, the Punk thing was, of course, like, that was not the plan of how that was supposed to go. And, like, Paige had a pretty short run in the grand scheme, and that didn't work out the way that I was expecting that it would and all. MJF very quickly ran into a rut, and that didn't end up being as great of a title reign. Somebody like Joe, I think, had like one of the better ones because he was mostly just sort of a reigning defending champion.
Well, that's where the disappointing thing comes, because like I thought Joe and Swerve had two of the best title reigns early this year. Like I thought that Joe's reign was just, you know, you're just world champion, reintroduces the ranking system, and just like if you want to be the champion, you got to earn it to take me on. And then Swerve comes in, and I think Swerve is like the perfect example of like both the man helping make the title and the title helping make the man, and they were both just in sync with each other. And pretty much ever since Danielson won the title, it's pretty much been like a downhill slope, because you've just had like the fleeting embers of Bryan Danielson's full-time career, and then now this Death Riders thing, which yes, they started off hot, but it's just devolved into nothing.
Not having a plan to make it any different than anything else.
Well, yeah, and the whole thing, like the big thing that we need to do in 2025, and that Tony Khan needs to do, and the whole creative team, we need to stop making AEW a character.
You gotta feel restore the feeling and make it all about like the soul of AEW. And
exactly, like it shouldn't be about like guys just wanting to take over the company again, or to like establish that like AEW's gone soft and people here have gone soft and we need to bring things back, or the elite thing saying like, oh, we're just taking over the company and forming it in our image because it's gotten too far away from what we did. Like, stop treating the company as as the main character. Your main character shouldn't be your brand or your promotion. It should be characters within it, because that's what people get invested in. I don't give a flying fuck about like the actual 3 letters of AEW.
And we've had our whole era of they're the alternative to WWE, so you can't just keep doing that and keep beating that drum. And,
now build it around the choose your characters that are going to be the top like stars, and build personal animosity between them, rather than just building it around like, oh, you said this about the company, well, this company means this to me. And it's like, stop talking about what you feel about the company, talk about how you feel about the person that you want to fight and beat up and take their title, or beat them up in the ring. Like that's where it's not like, again, just look at the history of like when WWE or anybody else, last time WWE really did that was like the authority stuff, and a lot of that sucked.
Yeah.
So like, and it's not like you look through the annals, there's always at least in every single promotion's like history, there's always at least one point, there's always one storyline or a couple of storylines in their entire history where there's a whole feud built around someone trying to take over the company, or someone trying to like
assert power as the most dominant faction that's going to influence like the company itself, as opposed to just winning titles. You have the NWO, you've got the Main Event Mafia and the Frontline, or the Frontline? Yeah, it was Frontline. And,
the Main Event Mafia, and Eights and things like that.
And Eights, Bullet Club, you know.
And the issue is that AEW have done that twice in 1 year, which isn't good. You need to space. You can only do those things like once realistically every like 5 years or so.
If not like every decade.
Exactly.
Like, you know, because you like the authority, everybody was just like, oh, it's a corporation. And it took a while for it to start to feel like it was slightly different, but it was basically just a rehash of the corporation.
Yeah.
And, you know, the amount of times that you can get like a general manager to come in and do the same shtick over and over. We've seen it a million times in WWE, and you don't get the benefit of being like, okay, well, you haven't seen that in AEW. The fans that are watching AEW are people that they might not watch WWE right now, but they're aware of WWE. I don't think there's almost anybody that's like a strictly AEW. They came into pro wrestling from AEW, or at least the numbers are probably very, very low. You know, there's at least one person out there that's never watched anything but AEW, but like, you're building a lot of AEW based off of, you're aware of a lot of these tropes. We're going to even play meta kind of references to it. A lot of people are like, you should know this guy because he's big in this company or that company or whatever. And every company's done it all. So if you've done it this year already and failed to do it at this year, I just kind of want Darby Allin to win this belt. I want somebody else to beat Darby Allin and, you know, move on and like kind of just, I don't know, maybe have like the next like 3 champions or so. Just be people. Don't make them a big faction. Don't make them, you have to go through a certain amount of people before you fight me type of a heel or whatever. I'd be down for a monster heel. That'd be fine. If there was somebody that was like good enough for it right now, I don't think there's anybody that fits that bill, but like something a little bit different. There are more than one variety of champions that they can go with. And this Death Riders angle, you have to, at the very least, convince me at this point that this is going somewhere other than just we're building to Darby Allin beating Moxley. Because this whole Moxley story, it's not a story. It's the preamble of a story that's continuing and continuing. It's like an elevator pitch or something, you know?
Yeah, so that's we know that Copeland is going to be at least next up, probably for Moxley, so we'll see where it goes from there. But, you know, Copeland has ties to Darby from, like, when he first came into the company, when he was involved with him and the Christian Cage stuff and Sting. So that could be the bridge between that, like him having his shot and losing, and then Darby coming in to take other pieces. Also, like, again, just this is like the minor thing out of this match. I don't want to like harp on it too much, but like just having Christian there just reminds me how much I hate this Money in the Bank thing as well. I just like I don't care. I don't want him to win the title like that. I would say I'd be totally fine with Christian Cage winning the World Championship, but like I say, and that would just be a similar thing. It wouldn't be built around the AEW thing, but it would just be, you know, another heel champion at the head of a faction.
Would they do the bidding and they stop him from losing? And yeah, it's
so like we don't need that as well. Like I say, I'm just like they shouldn't have done this stipulation. They shouldn't have put that stipulation on that match. Should have just been earn a title shot, get it in the next month or so, and he would have lost his title shot, or he would have won, or however they wanted to go with it. Like, he would have had a match against Bryan Danielson and would have lost, and then we would be out. That'd be out of our hair, and he'd just be focusing on Hook and all this other stuff now. But yeah, so this whole, like, the whole main event kind of soured. I don't want to say like soured the whole show. I still had fun overall.
Yeah.
Overall, I think the show overall was a success, and I enjoyed the vast majority of it. But just this and the MJF Cole thing was the like 2 sour notes on the whole event, really.
Overall, though, I mean, it's a pretty standard pay-per-view for AEW. We had a series of matches. Most of the matches are really good, and that's how they end their 2024, because we're going to turn back around and it's going to be AEW Dynamite Fight for the Fallen as the next show. And that's, I mean, I don't think that there's anything that really would have adjusted anything for our end of the year awards, but if that's the case, then, leave comments below if you think that, like, this was actually the match of the year, this was actually, the botch of the year, or the most surprising moment, or whatever it might be. But World's End is at least the finale on that front. The next pay-per-view I think that we have that we're going to be covering, is it actually... No, it'd be Saturday Night's Main Event, I think, will be the next thing, which is, I mean, it's not a real pay-per-view, but you know what I mean? It basically is.
What's Wrestle Kingdom and Wrestle Dynasty?
Oh my god, yeah, it's literally the next one.
That's next week. That's next week, pretty much.
At least on that front, we're not going to be doing post shows for those. But we'll have our predictions for that. We'll have that lumped into the hot tags. We'll talk about Wrestle Dynasty, Wrestle Kingdom, and kind of start the year off on that front. Still haven't quite decided on exactly what we're going to be doing for this next week of the, like, if we're going to have a true dedicated separate main event, or if we're going to all combine that in with the hot tags, then do, like, maybe the one to watch for this year might end up being on the Darkcast here. Maybe it might just be another episode recorded. Maybe it's part of the hot tags. I don't know. As always, leave your comments below. Tell us what you think about that. If you're like, no, I really desperately want you to make that not on the Darkcast here, then we'll try to figure out a way to do it. But if that's something that, it's like lump it in with the hot tags or, something else. But no plans to do any more recordings, at least with, like, New Year's coming up and all. If we end up doing a separate podcast, we'll probably record it on like the 2nd or something. But I'm thinking we'll probably just combine everything on the 3rd. And that's when you'll be hearing from us again. So this is technically the last pay-per-view post-show of the year, but it's also the last podcast of Smark Moment for 2024. And we always want to thank you for listening. We always want to thank you for leaving your comments below and showing your support in any way that you do. I see we also have X and Y in the chat. I knew Edge and Kenny would return due to spoilers. The two pretty obvious returns that were going to be popping up in some fashion, yeah. So I believe other than that, for the next couple things that we have in store, we have I don't think we have a blank week coming up or whatever. Pick a poison's always a good thing to keep in mind, though, too, everybody. If you want us to do something, I know that we've been tossing around the idea about even watching Red One or something because it's got The Rock in it. You just let us know. And keep in mind, too, that if you are following us on the amangotree.com stuff, then go and, you got Smart Out Moment, you got Fanboys Anonymous, and all sorts of different links there. So browse around, click on any of those accounts that you have, and follow me on any of those. I'm at Tony Mango on a good portion of them. And make sure that you're following Callum, too.
Yep, you can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Weekmeister14. You can check out the power rankings every Saturday on the Smarko website. Technically, it's going pretty bit on the Sunday, this one, because I've been a bit busy today, so I haven't had the opportunity to work on it today, but it will be coming out fairly shortly. So stay tuned for that as well. And while you're there, you can also check out the Fantasy League over at www.fantasyleague.com, also on Smarko Moment. You can see how our teams are doing, who's picking up points on our rosters as we head towards Royal Rumble, which will be the next big stopping point for this. And then heading from that point on towards WrestleMania, where we'll crown our winner for this year's season.
It's totally going to be me. I'm going to come back from my major deficit of points and win a million, right?
It's not it's not out of the realm of possibility at this point, because my people are not picking up a lot of points right now. So
it always does seem to come down to WrestleMania too. It ends up being well,
it's always the double points and the extra jeopardy surrounding that. So I think there's still a chance of both you and Rob to catch up to me by that point, depending on who wins prediction contests and stuff like that. So it's definitely not. There's still definitely a lead that needs to be brought back, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I'll take an insurmountable lead scenario in some situations, but we got all that stuff coming your way. I don't know what else we have heading your way in 2025, because who knows what the hell 2025 is going to bring in with us. But hopefully it brings us a lot of good things. Hopefully it brings all of you a lot of good things as well. And we'll be popping back up around in the new year with the next round of the hot tags and whatever else we have. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you then. But for now, this has been another Smark Out Moment, and we are being counted out.